Angie worked as the head nurse on the night shift and dreamed only of finishing work and getting some rest. The hospital had almost fallen silent when two ambulances arrived at the emergency entrance at the same time. The doctor shouted that there had been a serious car accident. Angie and Dr. Peterson rushed toward the doors. On the first stretcher was a young woman with severe injuries and the smell of alcohol on her clothes. On the second was a man with a serious head injury. The moment Angie recognized the familiar plaid shirt, her blood ran cold. It was her husband, Robert, and the injured woman was her daughter-in-law, Clara. Despite the shock, Angie continued working like a professional. During Robert's surgery, his heart suddenly stopped, and Angie handed the defibrillator to Dr. Peterson without hesitation. After several electric shocks, his heartbeat returned. 5 exhausting hours later, both surgeries were finally over. When the patients were transferred to intensive care, Angie began collecting their personal belongings. Clara's purse contained nothing unusual except a broken phone and the scent of perfume. But inside Robert's jacket pocket, Angie found a motel receipt, an opened box of condoms, and a bottle of rose garden perfume, Clara's favorite fragrance. In that moment, every scattered clue came together. Clara and Robert had not been together by accident. They had spent the evening at a motel before the crash. Angie called her son Ryan. Calmly, he explained that Clara had gone to visit her sick mother while Robert was supposedly in Chicago visiting an old friend. Their lies had been carefully planned in advance. Angie asked Ryan to come to the hospital immediately. Inside a private consultation room, she showed him the evidence. Ryan turned pale, but he refused to believe it. He desperately tried to explain everything away. Maybe Robert had only given Clara a ride. Maybe the items belonged to someone else. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Angie realized that her son loved his wife and father too much to face the truth. When Robert and Clara regained consciousness, Angie did not create a scandal. Instead, she cared for them like the perfect wife and mother-in-law. She adjusted their pillows, checked their medication, fed them soup, and never once revealed her true emotions. Slowly, the lovers began to believe she knew nothing. But soon, a cashier from the hospital named Sophie told Angie that she had seen Robert and Clara together only hours before the accident. They had been leaving a jewelry store, laughing and embracing like a couple deeply in love. Angie went to the hospital security office and obtained the surveillance footage. On the video, Robert gently opened the car door for Clara, walked beside her into the jewelry store, and later held her close on the sidewalk. The saleswoman from the store later confirmed that Robert had purchased Clara an expensive bracelet engraved with the words, "My Sunshine," the exact nickname Ryan always used for his wife. At that moment, Angie made her final decision. She would not forgive them, but her revenge would not be a quiet family argument behind closed doors. It would become a public humiliation that would destroy everything they had built. Angie carefully began preparing her trap. She pretended to accept Ryan's explanations and acted as though she wanted to keep the family together. Ryan felt grateful for his mother's calmness, while Robert and Clara slowly stopped being afraid. During dinner one evening, Angie unexpectedly suggested throwing Clara a large birthday party for her 30th birthday. Ryan immediately loved the idea. Clara could barely hide her excitement. She adored attention. Robert also supported the plan. A few days later, Angie announced that she and Ryan would need to travel to New York on Clara's actual birthday to visit an old friend. She asked Ryan to drive her there and suggested moving the celebration to the following day. Clara quickly agreed, while Robert smiled faintly. They believed they would finally have an entire day alone together. Late that night, Angie heard Robert quietly leaving his room and walking into the backyard. A few moments later, Clara joined him. They whispered and laughed together beneath the moonlight. Angie realized then that she needed undeniable proof. The next day, an old acquaintance secretly helped her install tiny hidden microphones throughout the house. One was hidden in Ryan and Clara's bedroom, and another outside in the backyard. That night, Angie listened through headphones as the lovers mocked her and Ryan. Robert laughed that the old woman and the foolish son had cleared the house for them. Clara giggled while mentioning the bracelet engraved with "My Sunshine." Robert promised her a very special birthday. At that moment, Angie knew the time had come. On Clara's birthday morning, Angie and Ryan pretended to leave town. Instead, they picked up a huge birthday cake and secretly gathered neighbors and Clara's closest friends. Everyone believed they were helping prepare a cheerful surprise party. Around noon, the group quietly approached the house. Ryan unlocked the front door with his key. The guests entered the living room and shouted together, "Surprise!" The next second, the entire room fell silent. Robert and Clara were lying completely naked together on the living room couch. Ryan dropped the cake, which exploded across the floor. Someone screamed. Neighbors whispered in horror while others instinctively raised their phones to record the scene. Clara desperately grabbed a blanket to cover herself. Robert immediately tried blaming her, claiming she had seduced him. Furious, Clara screamed back that Robert had promised her love, gifts, and a future together. In seconds, their secret romance collapsed into a disgusting public fight. Ryan stood frozen in the middle of the room as though his entire life had shattered in front of him. He stared silently at his wife and father, unable to process what he was seeing. One of the neighbors called the police. When the officers arrived and saw the broken cake, the half-dressed couple, and the horrified crowd, they instantly understood the situation. But Angie calmly refused to press charges. She told the officers that the greatest punishment had already happened: public humiliation. After the guests and police finally left, Ryan coldly ordered Robert and Clara to pack their belongings and leave the house. In that moment, the family completely fell apart. The very next day, Angie and Ryan met with the family lawyer. They had surveillance footage, audio recordings, and numerous witnesses. Robert and Clara did not even attempt to defend themselves. The divorce process moved quickly. After the scandal spread through the city, Robert lost his job at the construction company because no one wanted to work with a man publicly disgraced by such betrayal. Clara soon disappeared from Los Angeles altogether. Rumors said she had moved to another state. When Robert and Clara later returned to collect the rest of their belongings, Angie and Ryan intentionally stayed away from the house. Neighbors later reported that the two barely even spoke to each other. Their so-called love had died the moment it was exposed to the world. Angie also realized she could no longer continue working at the hospital. Every hallway reminded her of betrayal: the operating room where she had saved Robert's life, the corridors where she discovered the truth, and the patient rooms where she had cared for both of them. So Angie resigned from her position. Together with Ryan, she sold the family home and moved away to a small coastal town called Santa Monica. Using the money from the house sale, Angie and Ryan opened a small local clinic. Angie treated patients and handled the medical work, while Ryan managed the paperwork and helped maintain the property. Slowly, Ryan began to change. After the betrayal, he had become quiet and emotionally empty. But life near the ocean and the peaceful routine of helping people gradually healed him. He especially loved working with children. Whenever young patients were frightened of injections, Ryan distracted them with silly jokes and simple magic tricks. One evening, a young woman named Eve rushed into the clinic carrying her sick little son, Leo. The boy had a high fever and a terrible cough. While Angie examined him, Ryan comforted Eve, prepared tea for her, and reassured her that everything would be fine. A week later, Eve returned, not as a patient, but carrying a painting of their little clinic covered in blooming bougainvillea flowers. The thoughtful gift deeply touched both Angie and Ryan. Over time, Eve and Ryan started spending more time together. They sat in the clinic garden talking about books, plants, and life near the ocean. For the first time in years, Angie saw her son genuinely laugh again. She understood that the scars from the past would never completely disappear, but those scars no longer controlled their lives. Sometimes, in the evenings, Angie sat quietly on the clinic porch, listening to the sound of the ocean waves. She remembered the terrible night at the hospital, the betrayal of her husband, and the destruction of her family. But alongside the pain came another feeling: peace. Robert and Clara had lost everything because of their lies and selfishness. Yet Angie and Ryan, despite surviving betrayal, had managed to preserve the most important thing of all: the ability to keep living. Angie finally realized that revenge had not brought her old life back, but it had allowed her to close that painful chapter forever. And in the quiet little town by the sea, she and Ryan were finally given a second chance to trust again and build a new future.